news that no one anticipated. Let's just say that everyone is on edge when Mendeecees received the most heartbreaking update regarding Yandy. According to reports, Yandy's health has deteriorated, and doctors have informed Mendeecees of terrible news that no husband would ever want to hear. IQ staff drew Mendeecees aside for a private talk, and as he left, his expression said it all, according to family insiders. Tears, fear, an entirely broken man. The news is that she is currently fighting for her life, and her odds of surviving appear to be slim. Now, Yandy has surmounted some significant obstacles in her life, but this may be the hardest battle she has ever faced. The entire love and hip-hop community is rocked to its foundation. Fans are devastated, and celebs are speaking out. The concern that keeps everyone up at night, though, is whether Yandy will survive this, or will Mendeecees soon have to deal with his darkest fear. We're dissecting every startling element of this developing tragedy, so stay tuned. The atmosphere in the hospital intensive care unit was stressful, oppressive, and noisy with beeping monitors. Even Dr. Reynolds, a senior physician with years of expertise, appeared reluctant to say what needed to be said after dragging Mendeecees into a private room. Unspoken words filled the air, and Mendeecees could feel his heartbeat quickening. Dr. Reynolds finally remarked, "Look, I'm going to be straight with you," in a low voice that sounded almost like he was preparing for an impact. Yandy's condition, it's not looking good. We're doing everything we can, but right now things are critical. Her body isn't responding the way we hoped. Mendeecees remained motionless for a while, as if his spirit had left his body. A surge of feelings including fear, terror, and helplessness swept over him at once, causing his jaw to tighten and his fingers to curl into fists. His voice broke like if he had just swallowed glass, and he said, "No, no, no. What do you mean not responding?" In an indication that he wasn't used to breaking this kind of news to families, Dr. Reynolds sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Yandy is strong. She fights. She's been through worse. There gotta be something y'all can do. Mendeecees, we're doing everything we can." But those final words seemed like a dagger to Mendeecees' chest. Her vitals are dropping, and, well, we need to prepare for the worst. Be ready for the worst? No, that was out of the question. With his heart thumping his ribs and his mind racing, he ran out of the room. The corridor was uncomfortably sterile, strange, and frigid. He had no notion how to cope with the sudden upheaval in his existence. His mother, Juby Harris, was walking close to the waiting area with tears streaming down her face as soon as he stepped outside. Her voice was shaking as she said, "Mendeecees, baby, what did the doctor say?" He took a while to respond. He was unable to. Rather, he simply gazed beyond her, focusing on Keisha, Yandy's best friend, who was sitting stooped over with her hands covering her face, desperately trying to keep herself together. Infinity, Yandy's daughter, appeared to be absolutely bewildered next to her, as if her entire world were collapsing in real time. Mendeecees' voice was hollow when he finally spoke. "Empty." The room fell hushed as they stated. "They said it's bad, real bad." The air in the room was crushed by a heavy, thick quiet. Judy covered her mouth and screamed softly, her entire body trembling. Infinity got up so quickly that her chair almost fell off. No, she's going to be all right. She must be all right," Infinity exclaimed, her voice brimming with urgency. Mendeecees swallowed forcefully, attempting to maintain his composure for everyone, but he was drowning in terror. Then the initial surge of rage hit. He turned to Keisha and said, "Why didn't we catch this sooner?" in a scathing, accusatory tone as his feelings overcame him. "You were with her the other night. Did she say anything? Did she look sick? Something?" Keisha's eyes grew wide and began to well up with new tears. "Don't do this, Mendeecees. Don't act like this is my fault. You think I wouldn't have done something if I knew she was ill." But Mendeecees wasn't listening. Since anger was the only method he knew how to deal with suffering, he was going into a downward spiral. His voice reverberated across the corridor, Someone should have noticed. Somebody should have dealt in something. Just then, a nurse emerged from the intensive care unit doors. Would you please, Mr. Harris? There are other patients here, so keep your voice down. Mendeecees didn't seem to care, though. Not at this moment. Not when everything in his universe depended on it. Despite her weak appearance, Judy's grip was surprisingly powerful as she grabbed his arm and pulled him away. She murmured, "Listen to me, son," in a stern yet loving voice. This ain't the time to be blaming nobody. Right now, we need to pray. We need to hold on. And most of all, we need to be there for Yandy, not tearing each other apart. Mendeecees' eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them away. His voice was hardly audible above a whisper as he said, I don't know what to do, Ma." Judy nodded, her own tears streaming down her face. "You love her. That's what you do. You hold on to her. You let her feel your presence. That's all you can do right now." Mendeecees inhaled deeply and nodded, but as he was ready to regain composure, Dr. Reynolds appeared and the ICU door sprang open once more. His face, absolute urgency. "We need to talk. Now." And then, without warning, the floor beneath Mendeecees collapsed once more. What took place? Did things get worse for Yandy? Was this it? As he hurried forward, following Dr. Reynolds into the unknown, his heartbeat roared in his ears. Mendeecees followed Dr. Reynolds along the long antiseptic hallway, hardly feeling his feet move. Every other sound around him was muffled by the pounding of his heartbeat in his ears. It wasn't until they entered a poorly lit consultation room that he became aware that he was holding his breath. He let out a trembling breath as the door closed behind them, his chest constricted with fear. "What happened? Is she?" he began, but was unable to finish. His imagination would not accept the possibility that Yandy would not make it. For a few periods, Dr. Reynolds' face was unreadable before he groaned and clasped the edge of the table between them. The doctor acknowledged, "Her condition is deteriorating faster than we expected," in a tone that Mendeecees had never heard before, haste mingled with concern. Mendeecees felt sick to his stomach, quicker than anticipated. Even so, what did that mean? He detested the way he sounded weak, and his voice cracked at the edges as he said, "So what are you saying?" "That she's running out of time." After a moment of hesitation, Dr. Reynolds nodded. Mendeecees stumbled back, clutching the wall for support. "I won't sugarcoat this, Mendeecees. We're in a race against time right now. Her organs are shutting down. Her heart is struggling. If we don't see improvement soon, we'll have to make some very difficult decisions." He was numb all over. He said in a panicked voice, "Difficult decisions? Nah, man, we ain't doing this. We ain't talking like this. You're supposed to be saving her." Dr. Reynolds didn't bat an eye. "We're doing everything in our power, but we need you to be prepared. Ready?" How on earth was he going to get ready to lose Yandy? The lady who had been his pillar of support, his spouse, and his child's mother. He shook his head as tears that he would not let fall clouded his vision. Dr. Reynolds paused for a second before turning to look at the file in his hands. "No, I don't accept that. There's gotta be another option. Something else y'all can do. Ain't no way I'm letting her go like this," he said. Mendeecees' heart skipped a beat as she said, "There might be one possibility." "What? What's it?" Dr. Reynolds inhaled deeply. He paused, picking his words carefully, before saying, "A high-risk procedure. One that could potentially stabilize her long enough for her body to start recovering." But Mendeecees interrupted him before he could say anything more. "It's not guaranteed, and if it goes wrong, I don't care about the risks. If there's a chance she can make it, we're doing it." After examining him for a considerable amount of time, the doctor nodded. With his head spinning, Mendeecees hurried out of the consultation room and said, "Okay, I'll speak with the surgical team." He had to explain the situation to the family. All eyes were on him as soon as he returned to the waiting area. Judy leaped to her feet. Even the other guests in the room could sense the intensity in the air, and Kisha's face was still marred by tears. Infinity was gripping her phone as if she were waiting for a miracle. "What is it?" What's happening? Despite his internal turmoil, Mendeecees said, they're going to try a procedure. In a firm voice, it could be her greatest chance when it's risky. Infinity gasped for air. Mendeecees closed his mouth and said, risky how? Like, she might not make it. For a brief while, the room was quiet. We don't focus on that part. We focus on the fact that she's a fighter and she's going to pull through. Kisha then gave a trembling breath. Then we pray. Judy gave a nod. With his decision set, Mendeecees nodded, and we stay strong. For Yandy, he was not going to lose her, no matter what. Yandy was barely surviving in the intensive care unit. Her skin was abnormally pale, her body was still, and the devices beat softly all around her. As the nurses hurried to get the room ready for the procedure, the tension in the air was oppressive. Mendeecees' mind wandered to all of their memories together, including their wedding, arguments, love, and family, as he watched through the glass window. With his fingers balled into fists, he said to himself, "Baby, you best not leave me, you hear me?" At that moment, a nurse motioned for him to enter as the doors opened. She said, "You can see her before we begin." Mendeecees made a snap decision. With trembling hands, he rushed to her bedside and grasped hers. "Yandy, I need you to wake up, Ma. I need you to fight." His voice was brimming with passion. Even though her fingers hardly moved, her words, "You ain't leaving me. You hear me? I can't do this without you," were enough to give him a new lease on life. "That's it, sweetie." "I know you hear me," he said, tightening his grip on her hand. The medical staff began to move in and get ready for the procedure, but Mendeecees remained exactly where he was. "We got too much left to do, too much life left to live. You ain't going nowhere." Then from the monitors came a blaring, loud alarm. There was a problem. Absolutely incorrect. Before Mendeecees could comprehend what was happening, someone grabbed him and dragged him back as the doctors and nurses hurried in. "We need you to go outside, Mr. Harris." "No, what's going on? What's wrong with her?" Mendeecees yelled in a terrified tone. However, the only response he received was the image of Yandy's body convulsing out of nowhere while medical professionals yelled commands over the commotion. The nightmare suddenly became more intense. There was a spooky quiet in the hospital hallways that made Mendeecees' stomach turn over. He sat in the waiting area, his head buried in his hands, his mind racing with thoughts he couldn't control. This wasn't supposed to happen. Yandy was supposed to be Oak. She was meant to walk out of this hospital with him, laughing and rolling her eyes at how overprotective he was. But instead, she was laying in an ICU bed, battling for her life. His body felt numb. He had faced a lot in his life: prison, street battles, betrayals, but nothing had ever made him feel this powerless. Every part of him wanted to storm into that ICU, grab Yandy's hand, and beg her to stay with him. "She's going to make it," he muttered under his breath, as if saying it out loud would make it true. The doors to the ICU suddenly swung open, and Dr. Ramirez stepped out, his face unreadable. Mendeecees suddenly got to his feet. "Tell me she's okay," he pleaded, his voice cracking. Dr. Ramirez let out a slow breath. "At the moment, she is stable, but it's touch and go. We're doing everything we can, but you need to prepare yourself," he said. "Her vitals are weak." What was the intended meaning of that? Did he need to get ready to leave? No, that was not acceptable to him. His voice was hardly audible above a whisper. "Can I see her?" Dr. Ramirez was unsure. "Just for a second. We must keep her stabilized because she is unconscious." Without waiting for another word, Mendeecees took action. He pushed past the doctor and rushed inside. The sight of Yandy nearly broke him. She appeared so tiny and frail, dependent on devices that beeped in time to keep her alive. He reached for her hand and squeezed it firmly, swallowing down the lump in his throat. "Baby, I need you to wake up," he said. "I need you to fight, Yandy. You hear me? You can't leave me. You can't do this to me, to the kids." His voice cracked. He poured uncontrollably, covering the white hospital blankets with his tears. Who saw him like this didn't matter to him. He turned abruptly as he heard a gentle knock on the door. Standing there, their faces white with anxiety, were Kimbella and Remy Ma. Kimbella began, "Mendeecees," with hesitation. Mendeecees nodded, but he was unable to say anything. "We just heard. We came as soon as we could." His feelings were too raw, and his throat was too constricted. Remy took a step forward and put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Mendeecees wasn't entirely convinced, but he said, "She's a fighter, Mendeecees. Yandy is strong. She's going to pull through." He brushed a stray curl from Yandy's face and turned back to her. News of Yandy's illness had gone viral outside the hospital. "She better, or I don't know what I'll do." Social media was in disarray. One fan wrote, "Yandy Smith in critical condition? Prayers up." With the hashtag #PrayForYandy spreading globally, another person said, "I'm literally crying. Mendeecees does not deserve this." As Yandy's family members arrived one by one, paparazzi flocked to the hospital entrance, flashing their cameras. There was a strained, desperate energy. Mendeecees remained by Yandy's side inside. She remained slept for hours. Nurses arrived and left, checked her vitals, adjusted the machines, but nothing changed. The burden of everything was oppressive. Then, the alarms began to sound. The heart of Mendeecees stopped. Doctors hurried in, yelling commands. "She's coding," exclaimed a nurse. While they toiled feverishly, Mendeecees was pushed aside. "Get the crash cart." Mendeecees mumbled, "No, no, no," as he watched in terror. A physician reached for the defibrillator. Yandy was startled by the words, "Charging to 200. Clear," but the monitor stayed flat. Mendeecees felt his own heart sinking. No response. This could not be taking place. Again, it's shocking. Nothing. His vision was obscured by tears. "Come on, baby, fight." Another shock. A long beep, followed by a slight blip. The screen wavered. "She has a pulse," exclaimed a nurse. Mendeecees sobbed in relief as he fell into a chair. She was still there. She continued to struggle. However, how long? Was this merely borrowed time, or was it a miracle? As everyone watched the monitor's continuous beeps, the room became quiet. Nobody knew the solution. Was Yandy going to wake up? Would she live? Time would tell. Y'all, this is just heartbreaking. Mendeecees is barely hanging on, and Yandy's fate is still up in the air. After everything they've been through, this may be the hardest battle yet. Will Yandy wake up? Will she survive and be reunited with her family? Or is this the moment that changes everything forever? We need to hear from you. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Yandy will fight her way back? And how do you think Mendeecees will handle this if the worst happens? Make sure to hit the like button if you're hoping for Yandy's recovery, and subscribe for the most recent updates on this emotional roller coaster. Turn on those notifications so you don't miss what happens next, because trust me, you won't want to miss this. We'll be closely monitoring this story, so stay tuned. See you at the next one, and until then, let's all send Yandy and her family love and prayers.